What the topic of today is how can we improve HAZOP quality and decrease the amount of time that it takes to perform a HAZOP using large language models. So large language models being a subset of artificial intelligence. Most people, when they hear the phrase artificial intelligence, they immediately think ChatGPT. Well, ChatGPT is a narrow slice of the broad range of artificial intelligence that is used in industry and that is used by Connexus in general. So that's going to include other expert systems. That's going to include machine learning algorithms, all kinds of good stuff that we have in the lab here at Connexus. But this presentation, as I mentioned, is an encore performance of what we did at the Mary Kay O'Connor Process Safety Conference. Great conference. We go there every year. We'd be happy to see you there. And we like to do this follow-up encore performance because, you know, when you're in the conference, not everybody gets a chance to see you. In this case, it was standing room only. There were people out the door complaining they didn't get to get in because there wasn't enough room. But also in the conference, you've got like 20 minutes to give your spiel, 5 minutes to answer questions, and then it's off to the next presentation. So we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to ask as many questions as they want, and then also kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive, maybe show you some of the source materials, how this stuff got cooked up. Okay, so I think I literally think everybody knows me. Everywhere I travel, I was at a meeting and I started trying to introduce myself, and the group that I was introducing myself to started laughing and said, "Hey, we all listen to your podcast. We know who you are." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So anyway, you know me. I'm the founder of Connexus. Went to Ohio State way back when, and yeah, I do technical safety stuff. In addition to me, Melanie, why don't you go introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Melanie, last name familiar. I'm Ed's daughter. And I've been with Connexus just since this past September. I've been working on some software development and product management. And before that, I was actually working for Dow as a production engineer for a few years here in Texas, chemical engineer as well. So excited to meet all of you and talk about AI and HAZOPs.
All right. So let's talk about the problems of HAZOP the way it is right now. And I need to, I'm going back and forward to try to refresh my memory on what the heck exactly I was talking about. So as we all know, HAZOPs are something that it is difficult to get good people to do HAZOPs. There's a lot of people who probably shouldn't be doing HAZOPs that are doing HAZOPs, but I'll leave that discussion for another time. The downside with HAZOPs are logistics. So the current way we do HAZOPs is that we have an in-person meeting. And that in-person meeting is going to involve travel costs for everyone that's not local. So if you're at a plant, you fly to the plant, or the facilitator, the scribe, maybe some other experts that need to participate in the study are going to fly to the study. So there's travel time, there's travel expense, there is being away from home for long periods of time, which not many people want to do anymore. I know that there was a point in time where yeah, everybody in the whole family was mad because I was gone for weeks at a time facilitating HAZOP. So the more senior you become, the more family you have, the more difficult it is to disappear for long periods of time. Now, also, a lot of the people that you want to participate in your PHA study are the world's experts on a topic. They're very valuable, they're very high in demand, and when they disappear for a week or two at a time, a lot of work stops because decisions need to be made by this key person. They're not available. You've got teams of people waiting on their input to finish their design tasks. So there's a lot of hang up in doing these facilitated studies. Now, all of these hang ups are going to come back to bite the industry, and they are already biting the industry in that it is actually hard to find a good, experienced facilitator because nobody wants to do it anymore because of the lifestyle issues. Furthermore, bringing new people in to facilitate HAZOP studies is difficult because your best and brightest look at this lifestyle and say, no, no, thank you. Not interested. That's not for me. And let's compound the problem with AI. So this generation of facilitators that is top notch right now, they came from an era where we had scribes. So why did we have scribes? For efficiency? No, we had scribes because the facilitator who knew what the plant did and knew how to facilitate a study went to high school back in the 1960s and had no idea how to type. So the first generation of scribes were basically the facilitator doesn't know how to type, so we need somebody to help them. And it was a great way for a young engineer to learn how to facilitate a HAZOP, what the hazards are, how the plant works, because they're just basically typing in what the experienced person says, and then nights and weekends, and after the study's done, they get to talk to the facilitator and they learn a lot. Well, guess what? Cost pressures, nobody wants to pay for a scribe anymore, which makes life difficult. And this is happening because of AI in general. A lot of entry-level research jobs are being replaced by AI. And on the one hand, that's great today for an efficiency perspective, but tomorrow, those jobs that caused people to learn how to do things, and at Connexus, I'll just let you know, at Connexus, if you are hired today, the earliest point in time that you will be allowed to facilitate a HAZOP by yourself is about 5 years from now. So I need to pay your salary for 5 years before I can start charging you out. That's a massive expense that not many people are willing to undertake. So we've got a little bit of a crisis in HAZOP facilitation now, and it's only getting worse with very little hope for the future of having a great stable of really good people doing this task. Now, let's talk, and all this was the first bullet point. Obviously, at MKOPC, I was on the 5th slide by now. So the second bullet point is, when you're doing this study, you need to take notes of what's going on. A HAZOP study is a team study where you need to get discussion and consensus, and you need to capture that consensus in a document. And your final deliverable of this process is going to be the HAZOP report. So there's a lot of time that gets consumed writing down what everyone says. So the typical workflow for a brand new scribe. So at Connexus, our scribes are insanely good, meaning that we will be scribing stuff on the fly while the discussion is happening. And then by the time agreement is reached, we already have a rough draft of what it looks like. But the worst case scenario is that you have truly just someone who types. And the team will talk about stuff, and then after the discussion, the facilitator will dictate and the scribe will type everything that the facilitator says. Well, guess what? That is a ridiculously inefficient use of team time, because the time that was spent discussing the scenario and agreeing on the consequence, agreeing on the safeguards, very valuable. But those 3 to 5 to 10 very expensive senior people are also spending half of the day listening to the facilitator dictate to the scribe what they should be typing in. And that's a waste of time and money. And we need to do something about this. And maybe this is a role that AI is going to be able to help us out with. So let's talk about the online meeting tools, their advantages and disadvantages, because a lot of the benefit of AI is going to come from the tools that are listening to what's going on and being able to process that. So for the most part, that means you're going to need to have an online meeting tool going. Now, even if everybody is in the same room, it's nice for everybody to have their laptop open. Don't forget to mute your mic and mute your speakers and just leave one device in the room controlling all those discussions. But so you can use these tools even with a one room type meeting, but for all the other reasons that I'm concerned about the impending crisis of no good facilitators, because it's just a horrible way to live, let's talk about actually doing this remotely. Some of the advantages: massive cost savings. So I don't know what anyone else is charging, but when I spend time flying to you, so we've got some HAZOPs coming up in Rome in January. And you can bet I'm going to charge you for the hours that I'm on the plane. The plane ticket is not cheap. Hotels are not cheap. So there's a lot of cost savings in time and expenses. You have more flexibility. Now, what is another big primary failure in a lot of PHA studies? It is burnout. So you've invested all this money to get everybody in the same room in a foreign location. So you want to maximize your investment by having them sit in that room for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Well, you know what? After the first couple hours, the quality of the discussion kind of goes downhill. And at the end of the day, it's like, are there any hazards? Nah, this is fine. Just go to the next scenario. So the scheduling flexibility of doing online meetings means that I don't have to take people away from their day job. I can schedule 2-hour sessions first thing in the morning for several weeks instead of 1 week of 8-hour days. And for those 2 hours, you can be more isolated, more dedicated, more productive. So that's that kind of flexibility is going to lead to a better product, and also just better product, better quality of life, and also the ability to continue to do your day job and not do your day job while you're in the meeting, which is what often happens with these long duration studies. Also, increased accessibility. So when my teams are doing PHA studies, so it's been a while since I've facilitated a PHA study, but let me tell you what, the ones that are happening in Rome in January, I might have to change my mind because that sounds pretty delicious to me. But anyway, even though I'm not in a meeting, if somebody has questions about, if we're doing a HAZOP on a hydrocracker and somebody has questions about the initiating events for runaway reactions, they can literally just call me in Teams and I will enter the team meeting and I will answer questions about really esoteric topics. So the ability to get to experts on demand because they're already at their desk and you're only asking for a few minutes of their times. These are all huge advantages. And you should think about leveraging this even if the core team is all sitting in one room together. Now, what are the disadvantages of the online meetings? Well, number one, technical difficulties. Just this morning, I had a meeting with some people in France and my internet dropped out. and I had to finish the meeting on my phone because the home internet wasn't working. Luckily, I had the phone right at my fingertips, and I was able to join the meeting. So those types of things are always difficult, but you can get over them. Now, the loss of verbal cues, nonverbal cues. You need to be able to look at people, know if they're paying attention. And the key there is force people to use their cameras. And as a facilitator, you need to be constantly scanning the virtual room to make sure everybody's looking at the screen. They're not on their phone, they're not making a cup of tea, whatever else that they're doing. You're going to want to make sure that they're engaged, and also routinely ask questions to everyone that is not engaged just to make sure that they're in there. Difficulty with document sharing. I don't know if that's a big issue anymore, unless you're still have paper copies of P&IDs with highlighter marks on them that everybody needs to look over. I think that, I always say that in the mid 90s, when I first started doing PHAs, was the introduction of low priced 11 by 17 printers, and having your own stack of P&IDs. We were like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. How could things possibly get better? Well, they can get better because we now have low priced gigantic screens that we could put all over the room. So the document sharing is not that big of an issue. Now, increased distractions, honestly, you could put this on either side of the fence. So I am at home, and if Amazon comes to the door, maybe I might leave the meeting and go answer the door because I know that they're delivering whatever it is that I ordered that I forgot that I ordered. But those distractions are also the case in the live real-time studies. I remember one time I flew to Chicago. There's a refinery on the south west side of Chicago. We were going to do 1 week of PHA set. It was LOPA, not HAZOP, but you get my point. 10 o'clock, the alarm siren went off, and everybody in the room, like, they heard what the alarm tone was, and they knew that it was their plant. Everybody in the room got up and left. And I'm sitting there by myself. About 2 hours later, one of the people called into the room and said, Ed, yeah, we've got a big problem. It's going to take us a long time to fix it. You should probably just go home. So we did about 2 hours of that week, and, a lot of wasted time. Whereas if it was a virtual meeting, hey, no big deal. No time wasted. We'll just schedule it for another time. Okay, now, how do we make sure that we have a good online PHA meeting? So prioritize your technology and your connectivity. I got on this web conference 5 minutes early just to ring out any connectivity errors that I might have and show off my fancy Cordoba stage thin line acoustic nylon acoustic guitar. But if there were any connectivity issues, I could resolve them before the meeting started. And, because I buy all my fancy schmancy Apple products, I know I have high quality equipment. Also, enhance your communication. So if you can't do a good meeting over Teams, it's not Teams. I hate to tell you this, but it's you. Okay, there are ways to be effective in a virtual meeting. And if you're not effective in a virtual meeting, then it's kind of up to you to learn the techniques. So learn how to use interactive digital whiteboards, learn how to use P&IDs. I have learned how to show my iPad screen on my Mac screen so that I could draw on the screen and show people what I'm drawing, stuff like that. Leverage multiple screens. So my PHA software is over here, my P&IDs are over there, and I can move stuff around. And this bottom one is key. Boost your engagement and your facilitation skills. So be very structured about what you're doing. Set a lot of breaks with short time frames with timers. So you put that timer up and say, we're taking a 10-minute break. When the timer times out, I expect to see you on the screen and we're going to start the study again. Active facilitation. Everybody that's in the study, you need to ask them questions, make sure they're online. And the key is that camera on policy. So basically, if you tell me that your camera is broke, be prepared for me to ask you a question every 30 seconds because that's the penance that you have to pay for not having your camera working. And maybe tomorrow you'll get your camera working so that you're not on the spot all the time. Okay, now I did a lot of talking about LL or PHA meetings. Why? Well, right now, our meeting is being recorded. And not only is it being recorded, it is being transcribed. So the artificial intelligence that's built into Teams by Microsoft is able to do voice to text translation and create an accurate script of everything that's said in the meeting. So you're going to get a script of everything that's said in the meeting. It's going to be time stamped and it's going to include who said what at what time. Now, this transcript is gold. And let me tell you, over my 30-year career of doing these well, not quite 30 of doing these types of studies, there have been times where I got to the end of the day and lost the file. And I am there from 5 p.m. till midnight trying to remember what happened in the meeting and generate worksheets or update the worksheets based on my recollection of what happened. So wouldn't it have been nice to have had a transcript? So you're not going to miss details. If you go, okay, what did that one person say when we were talking about this topic? I think that was important. The transcript is there. So you can look at the transcript in real time, but you can also look at it after the meeting is over. So how is this powerful? Well, now we don't need to worry during the meeting about making sure that those notes are completely accurate. So what Melanie will tell you about is the process of doing terse placeholder notes and then fleshing it out after the study has been completed. This is going to give you enhanced accuracy and enhanced completeness because you're not frantically trying to summarize 3 people talking at the same time. You're going to get all that information later and be able to process it at your own pace. This is going to give you the key, which is the time savings for the team. One scribe working at night to generate the report is a lot less expensive than 8 experts sitting in the room during the day. So big time savings, big money savings there. Your quality is going to be better. It's going to be more consistent. And while you're in the study, everyone can focus on the discussion of the hazard scenario instead of worrying about how it's documented and what specific words are being used. Worrying about the specific words that are being used will happen after the fact when you review the report. Now, this is a big deal because I know that the first couple times that my clients asked me to record a PHA meeting, I said, oh, hell no. Absolutely not going to happen. Legal minefield, not going to do it. Okay, so let's talk about what are some of the issues with recording. Well, number one, you're running at risk of a poor transcript. So if I've got 10 people in one room with a crappy microphone, the AI is not going to know who is talking. And if they're in the back of the room, you might get some gibberish, or if you look at the transcripts, it will actually say unintelligible. For somebody said something, I can't figure out what the heck they said. So you need to be careful with that. And if the discussion is meandering and confusing, the transcript will be meandering and confusing. So the facilitator needs to keep everybody on track. Other issues with recording. Some people are going to behave and speak differently when they're being recorded. They're going to clam up. They're not going to want to talk. They're going to be afraid that what they say will be held against them in a court of law. So they're not going to say anything at all. Now, this is something that I expect over time. People are going to get used to it because the value of these tools is so high that they are going to show up in the workplace, and you're just going to have to learn to deal with them. Also, legal issues with recording the HAZOP meeting. The HAZOP is intended to be the consensus of a team, not any individual's contribution, which is why you get a good quality product. So this is why operating companies are going to need to really think through their policies and procedures for how they implement this. And I would recommend something like, we're going to record the Teams meeting. The transcript is going to be used by the facilitator and the scribe to create the worksheets. The worksheets will be sent to everyone for review and approval. After the worksheets have been reviewed and approved, the transcript, the recording gets destroyed. So that no one kind of gets singled out individually for any kind of liability. So it's not an impossibility. You just need to think through what you're doing. Okay. Also, the need for human oversight and validation. AI tools hallucinate. Now, the transcripts, they might just get things wrong. So it's always important to have a human reviewing things, checking with other people in the meeting to say, hey, this doesn't look right. Is this what you actually said? And they could go, no, I didn't say that. I said this. So, you need to be careful. And, the general purpose AI tools might not know some of the acronyms and some of the terms that you're using. So we may need to bump up the training of the AI tools that we're using to understand the specific engineering terms that we're using. And of course, data security, data confidentiality. I spent a few hours this morning talking about data security and confidentiality. It is a major issue. There are ways to deal with it. And, the vendors who know what they're doing have dealt with the security and confidentiality issues. All right. So what we're going to do now is we did a fictitious company. So those of you that know Conexus know that we have GoGo, or General Oil and Gas Operating Company, as the fictitious company that we use for training classes, demos, webinars, etc. And we built a new plant for them. When I say built a new plant, I mean we created the engineering drawings for a new plant. Oddly enough, we built this plant to match up with the equipment in the unit operations lab at Ohio State University. So Ohio State University has a dedicated one semester class on process safety. And they do HAZOPs of this facility as part of the training class. If any of you are affiliated with institutions of higher learning that would like to get access to these drawings to allow students at your favorite university to do HAZOP studies, let me know. I am more than happy to work with any institute of higher learning to improve their curriculum when it comes to process safety. So we did a PHA a couple different ways, one that leveraged AI, one did not leverage AI, and we'll show you the results. But at this point in time, I am going to turn the discussion over to Melanie and let her discuss what we did, because I was the facilitator, or I'm sorry, she was the facilitator / scribe, and I was the team that was responding to those questions. So go ahead, Melanie, take it away and let me know when you want me to change slides.
All right, thank you. So yeah, we wanted to perform a comparison of a more traditional HAZOP documentation method with this transcription and large language model method. So what we did is performed HAZOP on two similar but not the exact same nodes of our fictitious plant, go-go sanitizers. So the node that we performed a HAZOP on in a traditional method was the glycerol storage, and then with AI and transcription, we performed a HAZOP on the dilute ethanol storage node. These are just the two feedstocks of our fictitious plant. So, they had some different properties, but they were like, should be comparable in the length of time and detail. And in method one, our traditional method, or really both methods. I was the note taker and the facilitator. And so in method one, all of the notes were taken during the HAZOP with kind of a dictation method, or, I was trying to write down what he was saying as we were discussing things like that and get a detailed documentation together during the meeting. And then in method two, I was just jotting down a couple words related to the discussion in each section to make sure that I had a structure of the documentation. And, that's always a good idea just in case something happens with the transcript, like the mic was bad or it gets lost somehow. And then in method two, I used Google Gemini to process that transcript post-meeting and generate the more detailed documentation. Microsoft Teams was used for the meetings, screen share to view the documents, and then in method two, we used the record and transcribe feature of Microsoft Teams to automatically generate the transcription. And for both methods, we were using Connexus's OpenPHA software as the HAZOP tool. You can go to the next slide. So here's an example of what the notes looked like for method one, right when the meeting was done. This is kind of the level of detail that we had for our causes and our consequences. You can see some recommendations over there too. You can see it's full sentences, kind of everything that you need to know just on the spot. And if you go to the next slide, I have an example of what the notes looked like for method two post-meeting. You can see it's much more brief. There's some important, tags and keywords in there, which is important, but it's a lot less. So I needed to use the LLM post-meeting to put together the full story. So if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, well, if I could jump in here, just to let you know, I have seen completed, finished, final HAZOP studies where the worksheet looks like this. And if your HAZOPs look like this as a completed product, shame on you. Use English, make complete statements. Yeah, there's no reason for your final product to look like this. And if your final product looks like this, well, maybe you don't need the transcription, but your final product shouldn't look like this. Okay.
All right. So the next step post-meeting for me was to use Google Gemini to construct the HAZOP documentation. So here was my initial prompt. I uploaded the whole transcript from the Teams meeting and I said I conducted a HAZOP on Teams. Here's the transcript. I would like your help identifying the causes, corresponding consequences, safeguards, and recommendations. And it came back at me with a lot of detail, a lot of information, because I guess the prompt that I gave it was kind of asking for everything. So if you go to the next slide, you can see it came back at me with a list of basically every deviation, all the causes associated, all the consequences, safeguards and recommendations. But one issue with this was the consequences weren't like corresponding to their cause. It wasn't like the structure of a good HAZOP documentation. So I needed to do a little bit more digging after this and ask some more specific questions. So you can see The first one that I asked was, can you give me details on the cause of high pressure with pressure valve 119? And so then it came back with the consequences, safeguards, and recommendations for that specific cause, which was great. And I was able to move that information over to the documentation. If you go to the next slide. This was an example of something where I needed to kind of use my own human judgment and realize that what the large language model was giving me wasn't exactly right. So I asked it what were the causes of low pressure in the tank, and it said there were two causes. First, pumping material out of the tank without a nitrogen blanket. That one looked good. And then the second one, it said loss of the nitrogen supply, which we more talked. I remembered, and I was also just thinking about it. That was more of a safeguard, the nitrogen supply. That losing that on its own wouldn't really cause low pressure. So I realized that the Google Gemini wasn't exactly interpreting things how I thought that it should. So what I was able to do was ask for the specific part. Oh, you can go to the next slide.
All right.
I said, where in the script, transcript, do we talk about the causes of low pressure in the tank? And it gave me an exact timestamp. So I was able to just go into the transcript and read exactly what we said and make sure that I got the documentation correct. So that was very helpful. Next slide. This was just an example of one where Google Gemini got it pretty perfect. The consequences of an external fire really gave me all of the details that I needed, and everything was exactly how we discussed it in the transcript. So I was able to just move that over to the documentation. Next slide. And just one other feature of using a large language model to process your transcript is you can do research on the side in the same thread where it has all the context while you're working on documentation. So we had talked about the possibility of the water and ethanol mixture freezing. So I went ahead and just asked it what the freezing point would be so that I could add that information to the documentation. You can see it's pretty low, so probably the odds of freezing are not high, but we discussed it, so I obviously still included it and just also included the additional information that I gathered. And I think the next slide might be the results. Yep. Okay. So here is what the HAZOP documentation for method 2, node 2 looked like after I reconstructed the documentation using the large language model. You can see it looks pretty similar to what we had after the meeting using method 1. Full sentences, all of the information that you need in the recommendations and the consequences. So we were pretty happy with that finished result. And the next slide is a comparison of kind of what we ended up doing. So the first metric that we wanted to use for comparison was the HAZOP meeting time. We talked a lot about that, and just not wanting to hold all of your valuable team members for too long, or longer than necessary, really. So for method 1, the HAZOP meeting time was 1 hour and 48 minutes. And with method 2, the HAZOP meeting time was only 49 minutes. So that was a greater than 50% reduction in the meeting time, which is great. And one thing to note about that is that there is some post-meeting documentation time with method 2. That took me 47 minutes. However, it's very important to note here that that time is only required to be spent by one person, not your entire 10-person, however big team of experts, just, a scribe, facilitator, someone who was there and remembers, but can just spend the time on their own to reconstruct the documentation. And then one other metric, we wanted some way to quantify like the thoroughness, the quality of the finished result. And so we looked at the word count. Obviously, that doesn't tell you everything. But the word count for method one was 1,226. And then with method two, it was 1,010. So you can see that's a little shorter, and at first we were a little bit worried that maybe we lost some detail, but we read through the resulting documentation, and we did notice that the verbiage that the large language model was coming up with was kind of more concise. There was less flowery language. So we are kind of attributing the reduction in word count to that. Just a more efficient, really, it could have been a good thing, more efficient way of phrasing things.
Yeah. Like
And
my buddy Mark Twain said, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead, which basically kind of goes to show you that when you're in a hurry, you're going to spill more words because you don't have time to crystallize your thoughts, which if you're doing your primary documentation kind of in a lower stress atmosphere, you're going to spend more time and create something that's more concise and readable, especially with the help of AI, which I've got to say that I write stuff and then I feed it into an AI and have it rewrite it. And like clockwork, it is always better. So I will admit that Chat GPT and Gemini, they can definitely write or at least edit a better product than I created in the first place. Okay, I guess I'll just take over from here because we're at conclusions. Thanks, Melanie. We can improve the quality, and decrease the cost of doing our HAZOPs if we incorporate some modern IT tools into our workflow. This is going to include virtual meetings, but even if you're not doing a virtual meeting, using those tools, computer tools of Teams meetings that have transcripts and allow electronic presentation of information. Even if everybody's sitting in the same room, you can still leverage those tools and generate transcripts. A transcript, it turns out, is an extremely powerful tool for generating a report and generating worksheets that much more accurately describe what the discussion was than trying to do it live in real time. And if you have that transcript by itself is an incredible, powerful tool. But when you take that transcript and you upload it as context, we call it. Boy, I'm going to have a whole other discussion on retrieval augmented generation and context. But if you provide that as context and ask questions about it to a large language model, it will help you find information faster. It will help. It's basically just a great search tool. Where did we talk about this? When we talked about this, what did we say? It's going to be a great time saver instead of just kind of thumbing through paper trying to figure out where the heck did we talk about that. And also, if you have an idea of what you want to say, but you're not Mark Twain, if you kind of just type in a few sentences about what you want to say, these large language models will generate really good text that is going to be much more readable and just a better product than if you're not a very skilled writer, you trying to write stuff on your own. So lots of benefits from using these tools. And on top of this, most of your organizations are already paying for these tools. It's not like I'm asking you to buy something from me. You already, if you have Office 365, if you have Google Workspace, you already have these tools. You're already paying for these tools. Go leverage them. But one little holdback on that you're going to want to use an LLM that you are paying for. Why do you want to use an LLM that you are paying for? If you are not paying for your LLM, then the company that is providing that service to you, basically, if you don't know what the product is, you're the product. Okay, so basically, they are taking the information that you type in and using it to train their large language models. So that would be true if you're using it for free. But if you are paying for the service, check your terms and conditions, check your settings, and make sure that they are not using the information that you provide to train their base models. And that'll keep that privacy that is going to be so important for you. All right. At this stage in the game, we've given our spiel. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to questions, and we'll begin. Chris, are there any questions in the chat that I didn't see as I was going through the discussion?
Yeah, I see a few out here.
Okay.
First being, it's not clear how the meeting time would be so much reduced by method 2 simply because the meeting is recorded. Doesn't the team have to go through the same discussion process anyway during the HAZOP session?
Yes, they do need to go through the same discussion process, but the recording of the discussion isn't happening live in real time. You want to follow up on that, Melanie?
Yeah, so I think that a couple things contributed to the decrease in meeting time. First of all, maybe I'm a slow typer, but we definitely had to stop a lot and make sure that I had gotten everything correct in the documentation while I was typing everything out. Kind of had to stop the team and say, what did you say again? Or things like that. And then another aspect is reducing the mental load of the facilitator. So when I was so focused on typing, it was definitely more difficult to lead the discussion, and kind of ask the right follow-ups and keep the flow going while I was typing like full sentences out. So I think that those are the things that contributed to the decrease in meeting time.
All right. What else we got?
Okay, as there may be cases where an LLM output to a query includes external references to provide a better context for HAZOP elements, should the possibly extrapolated content be given to the other team members for their verification and checking?
Okay, so couple of items. So let me begin by a little bit of what we call prompt engineering or context engineering. So when you're asking questions of the large language model, you can at the beginning of your conversation, you can have kind of a standard prompt that says, we have done a HAZOP. I'm going to ask you questions about the HAZOP. When I ask you a question, only refer to the HAZOP. Don't bring in any external information from other third-party sources. Do not provide any output that is not specifically included in the study. So you can actually limit what is going to be returned. And that process is called context engineering, where you kind of set the stage before you start asking questions, and then in your questions, you're giving instructions to the tool as to how it should format the output. So you can limit the freewheeling of the LLM and force it to focus on the data that's in the transcript. So that's item number one. Item number two is that when we create the worksheets, this is not the final product. So after creation of the worksheets, you're going to send the worksheets back to all the team members for their review and sign off that what is in the worksheet matches what they said, what was in the discussions. So it's not a final product. It is going to get recycled to the entire team for their review and approval. That's kind of standard par for the course in what we're doing. And also, Melanie brought up a point where there was additional research that was done after the HAZOP study was completed. And the one example there was that we had some scenarios where we were looking at freezing of the dilute ethanol. And we did a little bit of additional research to show that, under the worst winter temperatures in Columbus, Ohio, where this plant is theoretically located, you're not going to get below the freezing point of even the dilute ethanol solution. So that might make those things irrelevant. So for that additional information, absolutely, you're going to want to recycle that back to the team members, and you'll probably want to recycle that back to the team members separate from the completed worksheets. So if there was something you learned that was not part of the discussion, you need to cycle that to the entire team to see if the team wants to include it into the discussion instead of just sticking it into the worksheets. Next question.
Okay, going back to the security aspect of AI, how confident are you that the information won't get into the wrong hands? You are basically listing all the weak points, lack of safeguards in the system while showing the biggest risk, a cybersecurity nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. I think I have been quoted. So I have a book. Let's see. Do I have the book on the bookshelf here? Oh, yeah, here it is. Security PHA Review. So I wrote this book for ISA, and it's a process for kind of understanding your cybersecurity risks by looking at your HAZOP. And right here in this book, I said that in the wrong hands, your PHA study is an instruction manual for how to blow up your plant. It tells you what initiating events you need to cause. It tells you what safeguards you need to disable to make a consequence happen. So absolutely, there is risk. But in terms of security, if you want to talk about security, I can only tell you what Connexus does. So if you're storing your PHA studies on your corporate server, are they more secure than in an equipment or in a vendor's cloud-based solution? I would argue they are much less secure on your corporate server than on our solution, because our solution is put under a microscope every day. I was just saying, I had a lengthy meeting this morning, and I'm going to have a lengthy meeting on Sunday describing the cybersecurity positioning for our product to get approval by the cybersecurity experts in all these very large international operating companies. So is cybersecurity an issue? Absolutely. Are there ways to make sure that you are secure? Yes, there are. Is a cloud-based solution less secure than simply having an Excel file on your laptop? Actually, no, it's not, because I would argue that our cloud is an order of magnitude more highly secured and monitored than your laptop is. As a matter of fact, the most common route to get into a corporate environment is to compromise someone's laptop or someone's desktop, and then they connect that desktop or laptop to a corporate environment. The number one, okay, so let me give you an example of how people, all right, the number one cybersecurity route into your company is going to be someone goes out on the internet and finds a series of compromised passwords on, so let's say you have an account on Etsy, or you have an account on Epic Games like I do for my Fortnite addiction. And let's say, you're thinking, okay, that account, I don't need to secure that, so I'm just gonna, use a very basic, password. And those kind of peripheral companies get hacked all the time. The accounts, your username and password gets published on the internet or on the dark web. People buy them. Now, your email address and a password is out there. So what do hackers do? They take that email address and password, and the first thing they're going to try to do is break into your email. Because if they could break into your email, they now know everything about you because they can read all your email. They know who you work for. They know what your job description is, all kinds of stuff. So now they're in. And if through reading your email, they know that you have an Amazon account, they're going to go to Amazon and try to put that password into your Amazon account and see if it works. And then they're going to say, oh, this person works at company XYZ. Let me see if I could log into the corporate server using that password. So all of those shenanigans will stop with two-factor authentication. And that's why I know I'm way off topic on cybersecurity here. Absolutely, unequivocally, every company, two-factor authentication for everything. There is no excuse not to have two-factor authentication for everything. But I digress. The original question was, is cybersecurity an issue? Yes, but cybersecurity is also an issue, and it's probably less controlled for the Excel spreadsheets that are sitting on your laptop right now.
Yeah, the question was more centered around the AI tool using your transcript rather than storing the report. But I think you covered that when you were talking about a paid versus free tool.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely don't want the large language models to incorporate your questions into training. So a little bit more on that. I'm going to kind of go a little bit into the weeds on AI. So if you look at the Connexus Integrated Safety Suite, you're going to see some artificial intelligence functionality already built in. So if you click on the question mark button, you can ask a question about how our software works. So where do I type in the beta factor in Vertigo? And it will tell you where you type in the beta factor, and it will tell you what user manual and what page you should be looking at to get that information. Now, the AI that we are using comes through Microsoft Azure Foundry. So we are doing, so we're not doing any training at this point in time. We're just querying, basically. And those queries are being run right now on Microsoft Azure, but the act of querying an LLM is a relatively low compute load in comparison to trying to train an LLM. So a lot of operating companies are actually doing AI queries on their own internal hardware. So I'm aware of several companies that I'm working with right now that are doing this type of large language model Q&A on their internal servers behind their firewall, because the queries are a kind of a marginal to low compute. I can actually set up my little Mac Mini that's over there in the corner. I could set it up to do a large language model, something low grade like a Llama, or maybe even kind of a GPT-2, GPT-3. You can run that on a desktop computer. So a lot of this kind of inference is going to get moved behind corporate firewalls, and you're not going to be using a lot of the larger tools to do that. Okay. Wow, did I go off on a tangent?
Okay, so there was a comment out here, Ed. Go back here. It says, I would count the team time to check and review the report used in method 2, which I would argue that in method 1 will be spent in the same way and amount since they are following the scribe live. Would that erase the gains we've seen with AI, with people reviewing it?
I don't think so. Now, it might be more efficient. So when the PHA is complete and the worksheets are complete, all the team members should be reviewing the final worksheets, regardless of the method, because now we have the final document that is going to become the official record of the meeting. And you might be able to do the review a little bit faster for method 1 because you're going to kind of more skim it because you've already seen it once. But that's an interesting question. Maybe a topic for a little bit of additional research. I don't think that there's going to be a big benefit to that real-time review. And honestly, a lot of the team members, when you're doing method 1, when the facilitator is telling the scribe what to type in, that's usually the opportunity that these people take to go get another donut, another cup of coffee, look at their email on their phone. So they're not listening to this in a lot of cases anyway. But hey, it's a reasonable question that deserves a little bit more research. We'll look into it.
Okay. Can AI interpret drawings, safety data sheets, and schematics?
Not yet. or I should be careful a little bit. So you can feed a P&ID into a large language model, and the more sophisticated ones will be able to answer questions. So if you put in a P&ID as a PFD document into the latest Gemini or the latest ChatGPT, you can ask a question about what's on that drawing, and it will generally be able to answer the questions. But most of what it knows about the drawing is going to be through optical character recognition of the text that's on the drawing. So it's actually reading the text and not so much looking at the figures. If you want the tool to actually look at the figures, you have to specifically say that there is a symbol that represents a tank, and there's a symbol on the side of the tank that looks like a circle with some words in it. What is that? Or tell me about what that symbol is. So you have to be very, very, very specific on what you're asking, because the large language model, the second L is language. These things work with text. They don't work with drawings. So in order to incorporate drawings into this process, you're going to need to convert the drawing into text. Now, that's a very apropos question because Melanie's brother, Nick, is doing research at Connexus today, actually, because he's finished his data migration project on converting piping and instrumentation diagrams into text that a large language model will then be able to reason based on. But right now, if you simply take a stack of P&IDs, put them into ChatGPT, and ask a question like, what are the causes of low level in this tank? It's not actually looking at the drawings. It's looking at the text in the drawings, and it's grabbing general information about causes off of the broader training base. It's not specifically looking at your drawings. Before these models are actually going to be able to reason about these schematics and images, we first need to do the reverse. You've heard that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, in order for an LLM to work, we need to convert the picture back to 1,000 words. And we at Connexus are doing internal research. We are mentoring some students at Purdue University. They are going to be doing a master's project spring of 2026, so starting in a couple weeks on this exact topic. So you can expect this summer to get a little bit more information on this topic. As a matter of fact, Nick and I are going to be giving a paper at the Global Congress on Process Safety on the results of his research. That's coming up in, when's GCPS? Chris,
April.
Is that in March?
April.
April. So more on this topic to come.
Okay, is it feasible to have one AI embedding model trained to understand process safety, PHA, and engineering jargon for transcription analysis, and another model trained on the same domain to vectorize and retrieve appropriate responses aligned with HAZOP elements?
Yes. Okay, so the question is probably speaking above most of the base level of understanding of artificial intelligence. So let me kind of step back a little bit and talk about something called retrieval augmented generation. So right now, if you simply ask a question to a large language model, or as a matter of fact, let me back up to the large language models we were running last year and the year before. When you ask a question, the large language model turns each word of what you said, basically word, more or less, into what's called a token. So every word in your question becomes a numerical token, and that gets fed into a neural network. And the neural network will calculate what is the most likely next word. And it will repeat that process until the most likely next word is nothing. That's how the large language models work. Today's large language models, when you ask a question, it won't answer the question, but instead it will use the AI model to create a workflow for how to answer your question. Then it will execute the workflow. Those are called reasoning models in the language of AI. Now, the key is it's taking the sentence that is the question that you asked and turning that into a sequence of numbers, a sequence of tokens. And that sequence of tokens, when you run it through the Markov model, is going to generate an output string, and you pick the highest number. And honestly, today's large language models don't even show you the highest number. Sometimes they show you the most likely, sometimes they show you the second most likely, so it can more accurately mimic human thought, where if you ask a human a question twice, they will never answer it the same way twice. So that's the trick to make the LLMs a little bit more human, is to throw some random number generators into the process. So the key is, there's a bunch of tokens that are the question, and then you calculate what's the output going to be. Now, a better way to do things, so like, let's say I take a Word document and I attach that to my question. That Word document now becomes what we refer to as context. So there's going to be the string of tokens that is the question, and then after that, there's going to be a sequence of tokens, which is the words, the additional words that you put in as context. So, putting in the context is something that the new large language models are going to do automatically. And they do this automatically by, when you ask a question, there's going to be a database search for what chunks of context in my database most directly apply to the question that was just asked. And there's going to be a special type of database called a vector database. So we're going to do a vector search not a keyword semantic search. And a vector search, it's just a different way of searching the database. I don't have 2 hours to explain to you how a vector database works, but it's basically looking for the chunks of data that are most relevant in your database and including that as part of the question that the AI needs to answer. So when the question asker said embedding, what that means is that every chunk of information in that vector database is going to be given a string of numbers that represents how close does the knowledge that's in this chunk relate to the question that was just asked, because you'll do kind of a minimum vector calculation to figure out which embeddings are closest to the question that was asked, and then we're going to supply that in this context. So that whole process of automatically doing that is something called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. So now when you're doing retrieval augmented generation, you're basically going to set up a database of truth, a database of known information that is going to get automatically appended to your questions when you're asking questions. So if you look at our help tool in the Connexus Integrated Safety Suite, we are doing exactly that. So we took the text out of our user manuals, we chunked it, kind of broke it into small pieces, and fed that into a vector database to create the embeddings so that when you ask, where do I put the beta factor, it's essentially searching all the chunks of the user manuals to figure out what chunks are closest to the question and take those chunks and put it back in as context for the question to allow the tool to be able to generate an answer. So now that I spent like 10 minutes level setting, now let me get to the actual question. So the question is related to how do you set up these vector databases to improve our experience when we're using artificial intelligence to help us do the HAZOP, which is something that we're actively researching. We've got beta software running, but we haven't released any of it. So number one is you put in a database of just basically how does a HAZOP get executed? So kind of rules for how you execute a HAZOP, how you set up your nodes, and you put that into your vector database as one vector database. You might set up another database, and someone who's probably still on the call is already talking to us about this. It's like, well, my company has template scenarios that are a good representation of how to analyze the risk of a certain scenario. So I want your tool to vectorize all of my template scenarios so that when my facilitator is working in a study, the AI will be able to say, hey, this looks like this template scenario. Do you want me to just insert it into the study for you? So that would be kind of like vector database number 2. And then vector database number 3, which you didn't ask about, would be that representation of your process safety information. So I'm going to have a vector database of my SDSs, of my P&IDs, of my relief valve data sheets. All of that information I could put into the vector databases. So when the AI is asked a question about will this relief valve be suitable for this scenario, it's not just going to answer the question out of thin air. It's going to go look for that data sheet for that relief valve and include that in the context when the AI is basically reasoning as to what the answer to the question that you just asked is. So being able to set up those databases, mechanically, it doesn't matter whether you put everything into one database or you have separate databases that are pulled sequentially. But from a practicality perspective, you're probably going to have different databases. And one of the things that we're working on at Connexus is a process safety information database that's going to be kind of a separate tool that artificial intelligence is going to be able to leverage to help you when you're doing technical safety studies. So that'll include your P&IDs, your operating procedures, your data sheets, etc. And all those will be vectorized and the embeddings will be created. But our expectation is that the PSI will be one database. There will be a general knowledge database that will be separate from the data about your specific facility. So when you're setting up your retrieval augmented generation engine, you need to know that your tool needs to hit all three of those databases or four of those databases before it returns an answer. So I got way off topic, or I didn't get way off topic. I had to provide some background so that everybody on the call could understand what we're talking about. But I think that answered the question. All right, Chris, what else we got?
Okay, what about AI used for consequence severity analysis, maybe dispersion modeling or process chemistry and technical expertise?
Seriously, somebody asked that question?
Yes, I did not come up with that.
I'm like, does someone have a bug in the Connexus offices that they're listening to what we're doing? Okay, so yes, we are. It is possible to do machine learning to replace other software, or I don't necessarily want to say replace, but enhance the functionality of other software applications. So machine learning, and I'll give you a kind of a high level view. Basically, when you're doing machine learning, you're giving a neural network a collection of inputs and outputs. So these 4 inputs generated these 5 outputs, and you'll give it millions of examples of inputs and outputs. And once you do that, once you train the neural network, basically, if you give it 4 new inputs, it will calculate what it thinks the outputs are going to be. And since we're all or mostly engineers here, I will tell you that basically all that's happening is a multi-dimensional curve fit, multi-dimensional interpolation. So if I put in 2 data points and it calculated 10, I put in 2 different data points, it calculated 20. If I put in 2 new data points that are in between, it should calculate something in between. It should interpolate. So if we take the process of dispersion modeling, for instance, and say, okay, I'm going to set up an input string that is composition, temperature, pressure, hole size, wind direction, etc. And then I use a tool like Canary from Quest to run the dispersion model. I can then kind of look at that dispersion model and parameterize it. And now I've got a data point. So once I do this, I can run a routine to generate thousands or millions of models, train my AI, and now instead of running the dispersion model, I just run my machine learning estimator, my machine learning interpolator, to give me a rough approximation of the results. Why would I want to do that? Because starting in probably January or February of next year, you're going to be able to access Canary through the Connexus Integrated Safety Suite and run those dispersion models. Well, if you're running one dispersion model, that's fine. But for something like fire and gas mapping, for any piece of equipment, right now, we're looking at 720 gas clouds. No, 2,100 gas clouds coming out of that piece of equipment. But if we could do millions of scenarios using machine learning, they execute at lightning speed. So, and it's a machine readable input and a machine readable output. So for something like fire and gas mapping, we could increase the number of gas clouds that our results are based on by orders of magnitude and give you a better decision on where your detectors need to be located. Because in the game of gas detector placement, a million okay models are going to give you way better results than 3 really good ones. Because those 3, let's say you did 3 CFD models. Well, if I change the orientation of the leak by, 10 degrees, the answers are completely wildly different. So more okay is better than a few highly accurate. And that's one of the things we're actually, this is Melanie's research project into artificial intelligence is setting up this kind of tool. So we'll keep you posted on the results of that one too. All right, what else we got, Chris?
Let's see here. You may have answered this, but are you considering implementing a Connexus tool, AI being able to read the user-defined database to prompt client customized support during the PHA process?
That is the intention. And we have something that is even in alpha testing internally. So on our development server, we have something in place. So the way that would work, I talked about vector databases. So there will be a Connexus database of policies, procedures, and best practices for how you execute a PHA study. That's going to be in what we're going to call the Connexus core. There will also be in the Connexus core templates for common scenarios. So low fuel gas pressure on a fired heater should not be magic to anyone. I've done this thousands of times over my career. So there will be Connexus core for typical scenarios. Beyond that, the vectorization engine will also need to be able to look at your PNIDs, and it will be able to need to look at your process safety data. So being able to input and vectorize your process safety data is a tool that, again, is under development. We're going to need to work on that. And then you, the operating company, are going to need to be able to insert your own vector database of your own templates and best practices for this engine to look at when it's making suggestions. So phase 1 is kind of a co-pilot where you type in, you can say, okay, I'm in this node, or it will know what node you're in just based on context. And it'll say, okay, what are some causes for this deviation? And it will go through all that information and it will suggest causes based on all that information. That is absolutely in development right now. Do I have a release timeline? Absolutely not.
Okay, are those kind of tools going to be built within the KISS environment?
Yes and no. The tool itself is well, yes, it's going to be built in the KISS environment. Do you get it for free if you have a license to open PHA? No. So that process safety information database, that is going to be a separate license fee. And that's where your company would put in its own data. So if you want to be able to put your company's data in and have the artificial intelligence access it, that's going to be a separate fee. But those of you that are working with us know that our software is so much cheaper than everybody else's. You're still going to be paying less for our solution than the other guys charge for their non-AI stuff.
Okay, I think we've covered everything I see out there in the chat. Does anyone have anything else?
All right. Wow. Well, while anyone is still trying to get a last second question in, the retention here is incredible. Almost everybody that logged in at the beginning is still here. So I really appreciate that. I will take it as a sign that this is a topic that a lot of people are interested in. And also keep your eyes on that Connexus newsletter, because I gave a presentation at Purdue University a couple weeks ago about how to prepare your process safety information for artificial intelligence, which is going to be kind of a precursor to that tool that we're developing and how it's going to be used, how it's going to be implemented. That is going to get turned into a webinar sometime early in the year. So keep your eyes open for that.
How much time can we save in the meeting if we use AI as a scribe?
So the approach that we were using cut about half of the time. 50% reduction in meeting time. Now, it's important to note that we didn't build a tool that's automatically going to fill out the worksheets. All that we did was we didn't waste time trying to finalize the worksheets in the meeting. So we put rough notes in and we fleshed out the discussion later, or the scribe, the facilitator fleshed out the discussion later after the fact. And that gave us a 50% decrease in team time because people aren't sitting around waiting for the facilitator to type. Now, is it possible to have an AI tool in real time actually filling out the data sheets based on the discussion? It's not ready today. Nobody can do it today but the technology is kind of there. And it's just a matter of writing up the code and working out the bugs to actually have it happen. So it's not available today. Will it be available in the future? I can't see any reason why it won't be available in the future, but whew, come on, people, baby steps, one step at a time.
Okay, can AI be used as a chat bot for PHAs, meaning querying past PHAs to help prepare for PHA updates?
This is something that we're going to have built into our tool, but it doesn't need to be built into our tool. You can use API calls to export our data out of KISS and bring it into your company's Office 365 or your SharePoint, and then you can set up a co-pilot to be able to read the PHA studies. So everything about asking questions about your PHA studies, we are going to build that into our tool, but you can do it yourself inside your Office 365 using Copilot. So that's another solution that you might want to consider.
Actually, just had a question come in. I saw sometimes AI proactively change language, which is a problem in technical perspective. Are they trained enough to help us in HAZOP?
Okay, so it's all a matter of controlling what the large language model is doing. So right now, I would never allow a large language model to actually insert anything into the worksheets directly. Because now you're kind of losing a little bit of control. So you want to basically take information that the large language model generates and cut and paste it, or use a button to push the data in. So the human always has control of what's in the data sheets. Again, the tools every day. The quote that I like to say is that the large language model you use today is the worst one that you will ever use. And the rate of improvement is staggering day by day. They're constantly getting better. The reasoning algorithms are getting better. The training is getting better. But also, at the end of the day, all of this is under your control. The LLM is not going to write text into your worksheet unless you allow it to write text into your worksheet. So be careful what you're doing. Be careful what you ask for. Today, in the language of Microsoft, only a co-pilot. We don't want it automatically doing the work. We're just using it as an advisor where we can accept or reject the advice that it's giving us.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.